everyone, my name is Tasha here for Candy Little Yams, and today I've decided to post my labor story video. I have a birth vlog here on YouTube. I'll link it in the cards and down below in the description, but I found it extra helpful to watch people's birth vlog and their labor videos because people can reflect and go into more detail when they just talk about their labor story than just the birth vlog that's in action where you're missing stuff and you don't really know what's going on. I've tried to do this several times but I went over, so I'll try to keep it brief but deep at the same time. I don't know. Here we go. So I'll just start. My labor started on June 26th at 5 p.m. I just say 5 p.m. It was more like 4:46. Anyway, 5 p.m. See, I'm going into too much depth already. I was cleaning up the house. My grandmother, who I'm living with right now, just during this time of transition, she had me, like, she's old school, so she was like, you still haven't cleaned the blinds, and you still haven't washed the carpets, and you still haven't washed the curtains to prepare for the new baby to come. So I was like, okay. At this point I had stopped working, and I stopped working because I felt too much pressure and I felt like the baby was gonna fall out because I had a stand-up job. But at this point I had kind of like mellowed out, and I thought I was gonna go all the way to 40 weeks, and I had just turned 38 weeks on that Friday at June 26th. So I was like, I'm gonna do what she told me to do. So I vacuumed all the carpets. I put all the curtains in the washing machine. I took down all the blinds and put them in the bathtub because we are old school. That's how we wash the blinds and whatnot. So then I proceeded to go ahead and shampoo the carpets of the house. 38 weeks pregnant. I was a small pregnant. I was still pregnant, but I was a small pregnant. So imagine like a basketball on my stomach doing all this stuff. It wasn't like a beach ball though. So as I finished shampooing the carpets, I bent over to get the little bucket that comes on the shampooer to empty it out in the toilet stool, and I was like, what was that? It was a gush, and you gush your whole pregnancy. Is so disgusting. But I was like, I need to go change my underwear. Like, that was a nasty big gush, and it kind of kept going. And I went to go check, and it was like way different from any other gush that I had my whole pregnancy. It was kind of watery, and I took a hand mirror because you all know I believe in the hand mirror and looking down there and see what's going on, and it was still trickling. I was like, I think my water broke. So I called my doctor cousin. She was like, was it enough to wet your socks? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, that's usually when we tell people to come on in, but you should just go in anyway because you don't want to be open. If it was your water, you don't want to be open for more than 24 hours. As you all know, it may increase your risk for infection. So I called my baby daddy, who I'm in a relationship with. I always add that part. And I told my grandmama, anyway, TMI. I told my grandmama, and she was like, I don't think your water broke because you ain't acting like your water broke, and it don't look like your water broke, so whatever, we can go. So my baby's father came over, and then he was kind of acting kind of cranky, and he was like, I didn't eat. So I was like, go get something to eat because I don't have time for that. And I was still trying to empty footage off of my SD cards because I'm a vlogger and I wanted to vlog it, and I wasn't prepared. I still had my hospital bag packed already, but it wasn't concluded, so I was trying to get that together. Anyway, hour and a half later, stop at Kroger, which is the local grocery store later. Me driving, I drove myself to the hospital, no contractions. Later, we end up at the hospital. It's about 8:30 at this point, and we finally get all checked in. They were a little backed up, and then we're waiting in triage. While we're waiting in triage, I start to time my contractions, and they start coming like every 10 minutes. They weren't painful, but it felt like menstrual cramps, and we just watched a little TV and whatnot, and then I started getting angry. And then I kind of didn't want the TV on, and I kept timing. It got a little closer together, and they checked me once when I first got in triage. I was 1 centimeter dilated, and they took a sample of the fluid to see what it was. And then they came back like way later, like 10 o'clock-ish, and they was like, yeah, that was your amniotic fluid, so you will be staying, but I'll go talk to, she said, I'll go talk to the doctor to talk about starting an IV for induction. I was like, whoa. That wasn't in my birth plan. I didn't have an intensive birth plan, but I didn't want pain management, so I didn't want induction, because that brings on your contractions in an unnatural, intense way that it's harder for you to cope with the pain in that manner. For most people, a lot of people do natural birth with induction. I wasn't prepared for that. So I was like, well, let me get up and start walking, because they haven't told me to do any type of natural methods for induction at all. So I said, I'm gonna walk around this little square, 4-foot square space that I had next to the bed, because I was already on the monitors. And I called my doctor cousin, and she was like, well, you probably not gonna have the baby in 24 hours. It's your first child, and you probably will get induced, but make sure they know your plan so you all can kind of set up a time limit for how long you'll try to wait this thing out or whatnot. And I was like, okay. And she was like, the best thing you could do is probably nipple stimulation to try to like induce yourself. So I'm walking around, and I was like, well, I better rub my nipples. I was walking, and I got to step 200, because I was counting. I said, I'm gonna get to 1,000, and then I'm gonna give up. And so I'm walking around, I get about 200, and I start rubbing my nipples like, this is not going well. So then when I got to step 400, gushes of water, like a geyser, erupted out of my coochie, and water went everywhere. And my boyfriend freaked out, and he called the nurse, and she was like, lay down. And I was like, no, I want to help clean it up. And she was like, no. So I laid in the bed for a minute, but as soon as she walked out, I got back up and started back walking again, because I think at this point she checked me again, and I was still 1 centimeter, even though it didn't hurt as bad to get checked that time. So I think I had dilated a little bit more, because you know, it's subjective, that whole dilation thing. So I was still 1 centimeter, so I started back walking. About 11:30, I was in a lot of pain, and I finally got moved out of triage, which is like the emergency room for labor and delivery, where you come and go and they tell you if you're in labor or not. And I got moved to an actual labor suite. So I'm in there, and I'm rocking, and with every contraction, I could no longer stand up at this point. Even though I did walk there, I knew it was going to be best for me in my progress to actually walk to the labor suite, and I had to stop a couple of times, and the nurse was like, don't go down to the ground. And I was like, I don't know what else to do. So I walked there, and every contraction I would rise up like from the dead and be rocking back and forth, because they was like, I looked at a couple labor and delivery like Lamaze videos when I got to triage, because that was something I had planned to do during that 2 weeks between 38 and 40 weeks, and I didn't get around to doing it. So I looked at a couple 3-minute videos, learned how to breathe, learned the best positions to make me progress, because I knew I needed to progress, you know, smoothly if I wanted to beat that 24-hour clock time for having my water already broken. So with every contraction, I would sit up and walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it hurt so bad at the peak of those contractions. But after it was over, I would lay flat out like I was dead again. And sometimes I would actually fall asleep. Very few of them did I didn't sleep through any of them. I think with every one, I had to get up and rock and back and forth. And time flew by until we got into the labor suite. About 1:30, there was a huge clock in front of me, and time, I wouldn't suggest that if you can control your environment. I was in the hospital, so I couldn't, but it was a huge clock, huge, and every 5 minutes I could see it. Every 5 minutes the contractions were coming. My sister even told me that after a while they were coming every 3 minutes, because she was in the room with me, very quiet and nice, the way that I wanted her to be. And my boyfriend, baby daddy, was over on the sofa asleep, which I didn't care. I didn't want anybody talking to me anyway, but he was snoring and he was messing up the whole vibe. We almost broke up. I almost called security on him, but I did not have enough strength to be fighting with him while I was in labor. So I didn't get him out of the room. He stayed over there snoring, and I stayed rocking in the bed like a crazy. And so about 4 o'clock, knowing that the nurse, I asked her when I first got up there, was she going to check me again? She was like, no, your water's already broken, and so we're not going to check you unless we have some big reason to check you. And that's when I knew I was going to like her, because even though I wanted to be checked, I knew that that was the right thing, because you don't want to introduce more germs than necessary if your water's already broken. Again, infection. So about 4 o'clock, she was like, come on, we need to try some different things. And she was such a blessing because I always wanted a midwife, and I didn't get a midwife because I couldn't afford one and I didn't have the insurance for one. But she was so great. I knew I needed to do what she told me to do if I wanted to have a natural birth and I wanted it to progress and I wanted to help myself cope with the pain. So she set me on a medicine ball. And at this point, I didn't know it, but I was in transition. And I think the medicine ball would have helped a lot if I had sat on it earlier, but it was too late and nothing was working. And I was in terrible, terrible pain. The medicine ball, I think it helped me progress even more because I had to get up, move, bounce around, but it hurt like all get out. And so I sat on that medicine ball for about 3 contractions, and she could tell that it wasn't working. I guess it works or it doesn't work. So then she was like, go sit on the toilet, because sometimes a lot of women like to sit on the toilet. And in my head I'm thinking like, don't they tell you not to sit on the toilet because the baby could fall out into the toilet? At this point I don't think she knew I was in transition because she kept asking me, does it still hurt in your belly or does it hurt in your back? And I think she was waiting on me to say that it was hurting in my back, because that's when the baby would probably have caused some pain descending. But I had an itty bitty baby, so I never got back labor, and I feel bad for anybody who does. So I kept saying it only hurts in my belly, and I think with her training and past experience, she was like, this girl ain't that far yet. And plus I hadn't been with her but about 4 hours at this point. It was only my first labor. So, and I came there not having progressed at all. So she told me to sit on the toilet, which I was a little afraid of. I was like, that baby gonna fall in the toilet. And at this point, I don't even care. I would just scoop her up and rinse her off. Anyway, so I sat on the toilet. And as soon as I sat on the toilet, I started grunting and pushing, and it was kind of uncontrollable. And I looked in the toilet and it was like blood dripping out, and I was like, that's probably normal. So then my sister comes and asks me, did you refuse the epidural? And I'm thinking like, girl, I told you I was having a natural childbirth before, like months ago, like years ago. But I guess she thought I was playing. And I was like, no, I didn't refuse the epidural, because I was getting weak at this point. And knowing the type of support system that I had, which was like kind of weak for a natural childbirth, because she kind of brought it up. Usually, anyway, knowing the type of support system that I had, I knew I couldn't be like, I can't do it, because they would have rushed that anesthesiologist in there like nobody's business. So I knew it within myself that I could not, break down like that. So I was like, no, I didn't refuse, but I was getting a little weak, and I was like, if it gets to 5 o'clock, which was the time that she agreed to check me again, and I'm still not progressed, like I'm still 1 or 3 centimeters, I'm probably going to get an epidural. I had already made up in my mind, but I was going to fight, and I was going to get my chance to get to 7 o'clock. So I'm grunting in there on the toilet like I'm having a bowel movement or something, and the nurse comes to the door and she was like, you're getting kind of grunty. How about we check you? How about we go ahead and check you? I guess that was signal enough to her then to, that I had made some major change and she needed to check me. And if you're still like 3 centimeters, how about we talk about pain management? That's what she said, and I agree with her. And she said, if you're 7, then we're a go. You've done it. You're good. So I agreed with her, and I was like, yes, you're the best. I love you. I even took her a gift after it was all said and done. I loved her, really. She was a blessing. Anyway, so she checked me, and like her eyes did like this, and she was like, you're 7. And I was like, oh yes. And I was like, I was kind of hoping you were saying I was a 3, because I really kind of wanted the pain management at this point. But I kind of wanted a natural birth too, so I was proud of myself that I had progressed. And it was only like 4:15 at this point. So I stayed there and I kept breathing through the contractions, because as soon as she checked me, I guess it was a real 7. Like, she knew I didn't have long. She knew I was in transition, and she started calling for backup nurses. She started calling the doctor, which none of my doctors from my OB practice showed up. None of the 5 of them showed up, and I had another doctor, which I didn't mind because I didn't like my OB practice in the first place. And so this older black man showed up, and I've never had a male obstetrician or gynecologist, so that was different, and I got a little bit afraid. And then I was like, I want this baby out, so I don't really care. And I was like, he's a man, so he probably has big hands. And then I was like, I'm probably wide open anyway, so it won't even matter. It didn't matter. He was great. I loved him too. He only came to catch the baby, never saw him again, which was fine. I was discharged from the hospital by a doctor who was actually in my OB practice, so I never got to see him again. And but he was nice. And then I was like trying to push still, and she was like, I'm not delivering this baby. That's what the nurse said. She said, I don't get paid to deliver babies. You're gonna have to breathe these contractions out until the doctor gets here. So the doctor eventually showed up, and she was like, okay, you don't have to breathe through the contractions anymore. You could go ahead and push. And so the first push, I could tell I wasn't doing it right. Like I wasn't feeling anything. And at that point, I knew that if I had gotten the epidural, I would have been pushing a long time, because I was pushing really hard, but I knew I wasn't feeling anything happening down there. So then it clicked, and I was like, they say push like you're having a bowel movement. And as soon as I did that, I felt things moving, and I got really scared because it was happening really fast. And it all did happen really fast. I was only in labor. I call active labor from the time my water broke to the time I had the baby. It was only about 12 hours. And at 4:46 or 4:26 or 4:36 or something like that, I delivered my baby girl, and that was it. And she came out, and it was beautiful, and they laid her sticky body on me, and I told her to be quiet because she was very loud, and I said, we ain't gonna have that, girl. And she was beautiful, even though she was sticky and she kind of looked like an alien. I loved her anyway, and I didn't know what to do with her because I've never been a mother before, but I knew that I needed to take care of her, and that was it. About bonding, I wasn't, like I said, I knew that she was mine and I needed to take care of her, and I had a love for her. But when people are like, you're instantly bonded, I wasn't instantly bonded, especially since we did skin to skin immediately, and my hospital was very pro skin to skin. I had a pediatric nurse who was holding her up on my chest, but down below I still had to push out the placenta. And for about an hour after I gave birth, the doctor was poking me with numbing stuff, and he was sewing me up. I had a 2nd-degree tear. She was only 5 pounds 2 ounces, so she didn't have in fact she had a very small head, but I think because labor went so fast, I didn't have time to stretch, and I think that's why I had a 2nd-degree tear. And plus I only pushed like 1.5 times, and I think that's also why I had a 2nd-degree tear. But anyway, so he was sewing me up for about an hour and like digging in there and swabbing out stuff, and I was like, nobody told me about this part. This hurts. I was not prepared to cope with this pain while I'm trying to bond with the baby. So I think that kind of like not ruined my first moments, because I was very aware, but I was also very distracted by the pain still going on with the sewing up of my cootie cat. The sewing up didn't hurt because I had the numbing stuff, and I was used to those numbing shots because I had a lot of dental work. That's a strange comparison, but that's what it was like. But the swabbing out of my uterus, he told me he was going in there, he had to swab out the blood to look for like other tears and stuff, which I understood. It just wasn't pleasant. But anyway, that's kind of how the labor and delivery went. Like I said, she was born. We named her Raven Isabella. I named her when I saw her. We had names in mind, but I didn't name her until she came out and I met her. And because she came out so fast and so forceful, I was like, yes, your name will be Raven. You will be a Ravenclaw. And your middle name will be Isabella, as if you are a queen. And you will be royalty. And I love you. And I knight you this strong name because I am an old spiritual woman. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Anyway, she was born 5 pounds 2 ounces, 17 inches. She was not premature. She was born at 38 weeks, which is term. And plus African Americans do tend to give birth a little bit before 40 weeks. So she was born kind of on time. She was not premature. But I knew I was having a small baby. In fact, I was sent to get a 3rd ultrasound, which my OB practice doesn't really do 3rd trimester ultrasounds. But since my fundus was measuring small, the doctor sent me to get an ultrasound, and she was only measuring 4 pounds 6 ounces, but they were kind of slack at my practice, and they didn't really follow through in a way that I thought they should have, since they knew I was standing up at work and would have low circulation, and I had low low blood sugar. I was hypoglycemic. I was not at risk for gestational diabetes, so they ignored it. But I think they should have paid a little bit more attention to my hypoglycemia and should have coached me a little bit more or something, or at least got me off my feet at work. But they would not give me an excuse to stop working, and my work wouldn't let me just stop working without an excuse. But whatever, I'm done with that OB practice, and I'm done with that. So that's about it. So thank you for watching my labor story, and the baby is healthy now. She has surpassed the average weight for her age, and she's a chunky monkey. So she's fine. She didn't have to go to the NICU or anything like that, which was such a blessing. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.